My name is Nick, as Dota said, and I'm an editor in AM's production team. And I'm going to talk about AM research methods and its latest module, which is Interrogating Colonial Documents and Narratives, which will be released later this year in November. So what is AM research methods? If you're not familiar, and as Dot said, it's quite different. It's a departure from our usual products. It contains plenty of primary sources, but it's not primary source focused. It's designed to introduce humanities and social science students to key approaches and methods for working with primary source material to develop students' primary source literacy and their critical thinking skills. It will contain about 200 primary sources, but the main content is what we're calling learning tools, which are a variety of textual and video pieces produced by academic experts from around the world to educate and inform students about primary sources, and they are presented with sources themselves intended to illuminate and complement the tools. It's designed to be used by teachers and students in the classroom or for independent study, and as I say, it will give students the skills, the confidence to engage with primary sources and assess historical evidence. The first module, Foundations, in this suite was launched in 2021, and as the name suggests, that provides foundational guidance on basic concepts connected with primary source use and historical documents, the questions students may want to pose when using them. And ICDN is going to be the first in what we intend to be a series of thematic AM research methods modules. So this will dig deeper into the key themes and considerations of researching colonial history specifically, and its tools and its guides will support critical approaches to colonial history with a focus on reading sources against the grain, interpreting archival silences, and uncovering marginalised voices, which of course is something that the DOG's colonial studies. And as with Foundations, the editorial board of academics from around the world have taken the lead in suggesting the sources for us to use and finding scholars to write pieces on them. Could I have the next slide, please, Dot? I can't see that you've done it, but I'm going to assume that you have. Yes, I'm going to talk a bit about the content types that will be in the resource. You can see that screenshot there is from Foundations, so it'll look not exactly similar, but pretty similar. So there's 6 basic content types that are going to be in the resource. We're going to have how-to guides and discussion topics, which are fairly complementary, I think it's fair to say. The how-to guides will be introductory pieces, either written or as videos, which will introduce students to really kind of basic considerations in the field of colonial history and the practical aspects of using relevant primary sources. So, for example, we're going to do one called Introduction to a Non-Western Archive. And then we envisage a sort of a path for users from the how-to guides to the discussion topics, which will be a more in-depth look at particular considerations, more detailed, more specialized. So, for example, there will be one on source-author positionality, so examining who wrote a document and in what context, and challenging the aura of objectivity that develops around archives. Next slide, please, Dot. So hopefully you can now see a screenshot from another screenshot from Foundations of a source case study using architectural drawings in historical research. So these source case studies are going to be written pieces that that concentrate on a particular source or sometimes 2 sources that show students how to analyze that source in terms of a particular topic and demonstrate how a historian would use it for their own research. And obviously professional historians are writing all these pieces. So each source is included with the study. You can see there it's embedded in the tool. And the text of the tool will break down how to evaluate the source, guiding the reader through approaches to reading it, also the source type or theme. Research questions will be discussed and formulated. The context will be discussed. And then it will conclude with post-evaluation questions or considerations for further research. You can see, if you have a look at the right-hand menu there, you can see the various subsections into which this particular tool has been split. Following on from those, we have a new type of tool for colonial documents, which is curated source sets. So these are quite similar in their arrangement, but they look at a set of sources. We're looking at about 8 to 10 per tool, which they'll have a commonality. They'll be on a particular theme, these sources, or taken from a particular collection. And the idea of these tools is they will offer practice in understanding and using sources through an examination of that commonality. So one of the ones we're going to have is on imperial tropes, and this will use a variety of different types of source, all taken from the 1924 British Empire exhibition, which will examine how the exhibition reflected the ideology of empire to the British people who saw it. We will also have teaching case studies, which again is a new learning tool type for colonial documents and narratives. These are aimed quite squarely at teachers. Hopefully they'll be of much use to students too, but the idea of these is that they will exemplify methods of teaching colonial history using colonial sources, with a focus on online sources and online and hybrid teaching, which of course is increasingly common. And these will aid teachers in setting assignments and lesson plans and other activities using colonial sources. So, for example, we plan one on producing a podcast discussing sources. So how a teacher might produce a podcast discussing colonial sources with their students, and one on creating a digital timeline with colonial sources. We will also have, we hope, data sets, which will present a data set, and then there will be material on how to interrogate and use the data, again, with an eye especially on uncovering marginalized voices. And we will also have practice sources. So these are not a learning tool as such. These are very much familiar AM territory. We will have about 200 primary sources in total in the resource, which will include all the sources which are attached to the other learning tools, the source case studies and the curated source set, plus as wide a variety as we can muster of other practice sources which aren't connected to learning tools, but which are chosen to exemplify as wide a range as possible of source type, provenance, geographical area, time. The idea being that students, having learned their craft with the learning tools, will then move on to the practice sources to practice what they've learned. As I say, about 200 sources in total from 35-ish contributing archives, all taken from existing AM products. So there will be some from Colonial Caribbean, as Lauren was talking about earlier. And users will be able to browse these by type of source, historical theme, contributing archives, geographical region, and so on, various criteria which they can browse and filter them by. I was going to talk a bit about a few examples of sources, but I don't think I'm going to have time to do that. So Dot, I will hand back to you, and I won't put the phone down, but I will stop talking.